Thank you for tuning in today. I'm joined today by Fire Chief Rob Duke and Orion Township Substation Commander Lieutenant Dan Toth. As you may know, we have two very important millage questions coming up on the ballot on August 4th for our police and for our fire millages. So we thought it'd be really important for you to just take a few minutes of your time, hopefully, to understand why we're asking for a millage and what that will fund in both our fire and police operations. So thank you. We hope this will be informative. And as always, if you have questions after you watch this short video, please reach out to my office or Chief Duke or Lieutenant Toth for additional questions or information. So first, we're going to start with our fire chief, Chief Rob Duke. He's been here. Chief, how long have you been here now?
Almost 2.5 years.
2.5 years. So he's came from Sterling Heights, has a wonderful background and experience in the fire service, and is doing a phenomenal job. So first, thanks, Chief, for your service to our community.
Well, thank you, Chris, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So first of all, our residents should know, and we're here to hopefully answer questions that they may have. Our fire department is fully funded by a millage, correct?
Correct, it is.
So our millage has expired.
Yes.
And there were two millages. There was a capital improvement millage and a operating millage. What was the total of those two?
Total was 2.48 millis total for those.
And so now we're in 2020. We're asking for talk about a little bit what you're asking for, and then I'm going to let you dive into some of the images here we have prepared.
Okay. So we're asking or recommending to the board was recommended and to the voters for a millage of 3.0 mils, and that's and we'll show you some pictographs to show you why we're recommending that to better serve the community for all the needs of the fire department for the future.
Wonderful. So we're going to jump to those in a moment, but right before that, I do just want to say that, as I mentioned, our fire department and our police departments are fully funded by these millages. So that's how they're funded. And so it's important for you to have that funding. And specific to the fire service, I do want to I know you're going to cover a little bit of this, but this board and the previous board has made some deliberate decisions over the last 8 years to sort of move our fire department from what was almost completely a volunteer or paid-on-call fire department to a full-time fire department. So talk a little bit about the differences between those.
Well, the difference is we started with what's called paid-on-call personnel. And so what they do is they basically have full-time jobs during the day. They respond when available via pager. Tone will go out from dispatch. They get it via the pager. If they're available to respond, they can respond. If they're not able to, so we're not really sure exactly how many paid-on-call firefighters we may receive or be able to respond to a scene. So we transitioned several years ago, almost 6 years ago now, to a full-time, all-hazard, full-service fire department where we're staffed with 7 personnel on shift every day that provide protection, both fire and EMS, basic life support transport now to the residents.
And so that's important because now when the tone comes in or the 911 call comes in, where before firefighters would have to come from their home or their job or wherever they're at to the station to get the apparatus to go. Now they're obviously at the fire station. They can come right from there, right?
Correct, right. So we have personnel strategically located throughout the community in the fire stations. Like you mentioned, when a tone does come in or a call for service comes in, the firefighters get in whichever appropriate apparatus, whether it's an ambulance or a fire truck, and respond quickly to somebody's call for service. Okay,
great. So let's take a look at some of these images you prepared for us today. So talk just a little bit about the community and since you've been here, what you've learned.
Sure. So basically, the number of residents that we're seeing right now is about almost 39,000 residents here, and we'll obviously have a better definitive answer with the census. We have 13,867 homes and apartments, 911 commercial buildings throughout the community, and last year in 2019, we responded to 3,141 calls for service.
I can't just leave this there, but we have 911 commercial buildings.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so going forward, and as you mentioned, I mean, obviously the volume of calls is continued to increase as we've grown. So talk a little bit about that.
Right. So over the last 10 years, as you can see from our pictograph, we've seen a 124% increase in calls for service over the last 10 years. In 2010, we had 1,600, and now we're predicting or looking at 3,600 calls for 2020. So we are getting extremely busy. We see on average 5 to 6% increase every year, but over our 10 years, 124%.
Okay. And then I think it's important as we're asking folks to open their wallet, and I would say this, I know that I've worked closely with the members of this board. Now, while we don't always agree on everything, the members of our board have unanimously agreed on this proposal that we're asking our residents to consider, as well as the police proposal. And I think a lot of that has to do with trying to continue to increase the level of service in our community. So what do our residents see that's different in other communities around us?
Well, as you can see, our surrounding communities, they provide advanced life support transport. We just started in beginning of 2019 providing basic life support, so we can transport minor incidents such as a sprained knee, slip and fall, stuff like that. So we're not able to provide the advanced life support or paramedic services that our surrounding communities do. As you can see, it's important because we are in the center of the other communities that we mutually respond with. They are all advanced life support. So that is what our goal is to become in the first quarter of 2021 as advanced life support and provide that better service to the residents.
Yeah, and I think I can say that even before you were here with previous Chief Bob Smith, we had started to talk about this transition. And to me, what the best way to describe it to the residents is it's just the level of service. We have, in my opinion, and I am biased, the most professional, dedicated staff in the fire service. They serve with distinction. That said, they can only do so much with their current basic life support.
Right.
Whatever that would be called, representation.
Sure.
or
right.
So we're moving toward where we don't have to rely on an outside third-party company. Correct. Star EMS is right. Who we currently work with, so that any sort of life-threatening incidences can be handled directly by our personnel.
Correct. And the nice thing with that is there's no wait time. So we're responding as soon as the tones go off. We respond within 5 minutes. We're to somebody's house, providing basically a rolling emergency center to their immediate needs.
Okay, so that is important. That's important for people to understand that the proposal is asking for a slight increase, but the level of service is continuing to evolve as we've planned for the last several years.
Right, and so what you can see also is basically we're recommending in the millage is improving our response times and really, as you mentioned, enhancing our emergency services to the community. We're going to hopefully provide an additional ambulance to the community. Currently we have 3. We're going to provide, as we already talked about, advanced life support or that paramedic rolling emergency center where we can provide more advanced cardiac monitoring, diagnosing myocardial infarctions or heart attacks, stroke identification, providing those emergent medications that we might need to help intervene, hiring additional personnel to fully staff all 4 fire stations 24/7, providing, as I said, that all-hazard fire response, and then replacing emergency equipment and apparatus to maintain our reliability and good service to the community.
Yeah, and so I think it's important to see, one of the questions I asked you early on was, well, not that we have to do what the neighbors are doing, but let's compare so we make sure what we're asking for is we're not out in left field. One of the things I mentioned at the onset was we had 2 millages. We had a capital improvement millage and an operational millage. Now we're sort of combining those, so we will be doing capital projects and replacing engines and things that are 20 plus years old and right. Equipment that needs to be replaced, but also getting to that full staffing where we still aren't at what we would call full staffing for fire service for our side. So let's talk about the neighbors a little bit.
So as you mentioned, our comparables basically, as you can see from our pictograph, we have one of the higher populations at this time when we looked at it, almost 39,000 residents. We provide comparatively, we have more fire stations. Our increase in calls for service are more, only second to Rochester Hills. So we are providing more calls for service, and we really are out there all the time providing that dedicated service to the residents.
Right, so we will be, if we're successful, if this millage is successful, we'll be increasing the staffing, replacing apparatus and things like that. The other thing is just dollars and cents of it. So again, we sort of did the same thing. We don't have to do what the neighbors are doing, but I like to look at that as almost a double check to make sure that we're not asking for something a lot more than someone else. And frankly, because we're a little bit behind, and that's not meant to be negative, it just means we made some decisions in the past to not move things forward as other departments did. But when it's all said and done, I mean, we will be comparable to what neighboring communities are paying for fire service,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. So when you look at our comparables, again, that's who we always base our benchmarks on. You can see from our surrounding communities, we will still be the lowest millage rate if successful on the August 4th ballot. I know, speaking with Chief in Oxford, they're asking for an additional millage over their 3.5 mills now. So we're still going to be one of the lowest millage, providing enhanced service to our community and residents, which is truly beneficial.
Right, and so what we're saying, so the dollars and cents of it, if you're out there saying, okay, I support fire, but I want to know how much this is actually going to cost me, and then 3 mills is the easy way to break that down is the average value of a house in Orion is just over $200,000, so the taxable value is half that. So for every mill, it makes the math really easy for our purposes. So for a house that's an average house, it's worth around $200,000. Their taxable value is $100,000, so every mill is $100. So right. 3 mills would be about $300.
Correct.
For the year for fire service. It's about between a $50 and $60 increase for the average resident from what they paid, what they've been paying, essentially.
Right.
And the other thing I think that's really important for residents to know is, when we started this process a little over 4 years ago, we had fire stations that didn't have women's restrooms. We had fire stations that didn't have sleeping quarters. We had a 42-year-old ladder truck. So we had a lot of work to do, right. And I think we should celebrate some of our successes. All 4 of the fire stations have been modernized.
Absolutely. That's really been a highlight. That was the first task I was given when I started. Was, hey, you're coming in at 6:30. We're starting the renovation of Station 1, so we have 4 fully functional fire stations that are have the ability to house full-time firefighters 24/7, male and female accommodations. So we do have really the best of the best. We are up to date on everything that we can, fully functional, aesthetically pleasing, just really good buildings to last us far into the future.
So Chief, thank you for providing all that information. I just want to reiterate that while we're not telling you how to vote, we're encouraging you to get the information and make sure you make an informed vote on August 4th. Some of you are getting those absentee ballots probably even as you're watching this. So the most important thing we want you to know is to have the information. If you have other questions that we haven't answered, you want to pick Chief Duke's brain, we absolutely welcome that. He's available and willing and ready to answer any questions you might have. So get the information. Thank you for your past support of our fire department and your continued support. And I do want to say this, even though it's not meant to be negative to see where we've lagged a little bit behind our neighbors, our team is awesome. I was trying to count before this. I feel like I was at a dozen different recognitions last year for life saves. Every time we go to the Oakland County, when we save a life, they recognize the personnel that was on that call. And I don't know, I don't keep track, but it seems like we're there a lot more often than a lot of the other departments. So our men and women do go out and save lives, but we're hopeful to continue bringing our fire department into the 21st century with providing that advanced life support service. So thank you, Chief Duke. Again, if you have further questions, please reach out to Chief Duke. And stay tuned, because when we come back, we'll be with Lieutenant Toth.
ONTV celebrates more than 30 years of offering public, government, and educational access to the Lake Orion community. Local residents are invited to attend a 10-week video production class that offers instruction on studio production, field production, and non-linear editing. Upon completion of the class, graduates are encouraged to utilize ONTV studio and equipment to produce programming that airs on local cable TV and online. ONTV also offers access to its podcast room to those dreaming of starting their own series. ONTV staff also venture out into the community to capture local events, concerts, high school sports, and more. If you watch local government meetings, you can thank ONTV for providing the staff and equipment to televise meetings on local cable TV and archive them online to view on demand in the future. ONTV also supports the award-winning Dragon Broadcasting at Lake Orion High School with state-of-the-art video equipment so students can be prepared for a career in video production. Tune into Comcast channels 10, 20, and 22, or channel 99 on AT&T to see the wide variety of programming created by staff, students, and volunteer producers. For more information, call 248-693-3377 or visit ONTV.org today.
Okay, we're back with Lieutenant Dan Toth, who's been the station commander here in Orion Township since 2012. So 8 years, Dan. Time flies when you're having fun, right?
It sure does.
So Dan, thanks for joining us. And just like the police, just like the fire millage we just discussed with Chief Duke, the police millage has also expired. I meant to mention this, but both these millages were looking for a 6-year millage to try to get them off the main election cycles. They'll still be on a regular election, but they're both 6-year millage requests. And so Dan, you've been here 8 years. You've seen a lot of change. You've seen a lot of growth. You've seen a lot of increase in calls and demand on the police department. And I think before I throw it to you, in a time where it's tough to be a police officer in this country, I think our residents still clearly see the value and understand the value of having a safe community. And I think it directly correlates to property values, to the good schools that we have. So talk just a little bit about your thoughts on just what you've seen, and then let's dovetail into what we're asking our residents to consider.
You know, this is a good point. We get a lot of our residents that write in, they come into the station, they drop off treats for the troops, so to speak. And I want to take a moment just to thank everyone behind the scenes. Seldom do they want to leave their name or do they want recognition, but we have a lot of support. I think everyone understands the immense pressure that you know, the police have these days. You know, the men and women in uniform, it's a fine line we're walking every day. And then when we, you know, 2020, when our millages come up, we certainly couldn't plan for any of this, from COVID to the civil unrest, and it makes it a lot more difficult. But like you said, Chris, our residents really support us, and they know we're here for the long term. We've been here. Our partnership in Orion Township goes back to 1952, one of the earliest contracts in Oakland County. So
right. So we'll just get this out there. So we're also on the police side of things asking for a slight increase. We're looking for a 3.5 millage rate. Correct, Dan?
yes, and that was one question that we received a couple times. You know, it looks like we're asking for 3.5 mils. No, the voters authorized a 3 mil in 2012, and what we're asking for is just a half mil in 2020. So we have not needed to ask for any other millage increases over the last, 8-9 years now, but because we've been running a deficit, and we knew in 2012, when I did a similar presentation, as I think some of the folks that are seeing on their screen now, we knew that a 3 mil would be so tight because of the growth that we were seeing in 2012, and definitely for the last 8 years.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's talk right now about growth. Let's talk about growth, and then kind of how many police officers should we have for a community our size?
Well, the Department of Justice recommends, as a general guideline, 1 police officer per 1,000 residents. In a city, a large urban city, that would increase, okay? But in a setting like Orion Township, it's recommended 1 police officer per 1,000 residents. We are at 40,000 residents, and we'll see the results of the census here, but we're confident, and with the growth that is happening right now and in the next 3 years, we know where this is going. But we currently have 33 certified deputies currently, right now. And I think it's important to note that over the last decade, we have only increased our staffing by just 10%, or just 3 positions in Orion Township. And 2 of those positions because of the active shooters and some of the violence in the schools, we took that upon ourselves, as you know, Chris, when we made that decision 2 years ago to add another deputy to the schools as another level of security. So
yeah, so that's been great. I think we've heard a lot of wonderful feedback from the school district and from the parents. But yeah, I mean, we're still sort of below that recommended level. Now, however, we do have a very safe community, right? I mean, we've been blessed, thanks to your leadership, to get recognized year after year for being one of the safest communities in the state, right?
Yes, absolutely. We're recognized by a couple different organizations, the real estate and property value organizations, as one of the safest communities. And it's all based on Department of Justice data. It's not our data. It's all reported through the state Department of Justice, and that's how it's vetted out. But we've done just a fabulous job of sharing resources in the community, whether it's the Marine Division, the auto theft team, the drug enforcement team, and we just do a great job of using collectively all of our resources. And we have a great staff in Orion Township. The deputies that live and work in Orion Township, their children go to our schools, they use our businesses, so it is your local police.
Yeah, and it feels like that. I mean, I've been here for 8 years. We've worked together for 8 years, and the deputies have the opportunity to bump to other substations, and we don't have they're trying to get in. Nobody wants to leave. So that's kind of been a great thing, because, I've worked with a lot of the same deputies since I arrived here. And when I talk to my colleagues in other parts of the community, they don't know any of their deputies' names because they're on a 12-month rotation and then they're out to someplace else. So that's something kind of unique to us as well.
Right, yes. There's not too many openings that come up in Orion Township.
Right. So we've been very fiscally responsible, I would say that, and you can look into that for yourself. But and we've kind of kept the levels of staffing really modest. I think that the plan you presented to the board and that we're talking a little about today is a really good plan, because it allows us to slightly increase our staffing as we see the growth. And then calls for service, much like Chief Duke mentioned, you've seen quite an increase in calls for service over the last 8 years.
Yes, and I think especially with everything that's going on in the world, especially in the last 6 or 7 months, our calls have gone up, not down. The demands on public safety, there's more conflict in the world, unfortunately, than there was 2 years or 6 years ago. And I think folks sometimes don't realize that everything starts with that 911 system in our public safety, and it comes all back around. So when you call the suicide prevention line, and you're calling poison control, and you're calling a lot of these other resources, it ultimately does come back to the police and fire, And I think people don't realize that much of it comes back, the mental health, the substance problems that we have, that all comes back around. So we've seen a 37% increase in calls for service in the last decade. And when we look back at 20 years worth of data, it's always consistent. We can count on 4 to 6% increase in calls for police services. It's been very consistent. It's been between 4 and 6%. And given the new subdivisions that are going in, this was a hard decision to ask taxpayers for more money. It's hard for us. I know, Chris, it's hard for you. We struggle with that, but this just wasn't our opinion. When we sat down with the budget, and we do a 3-year out budget. So when we sat down, the numbers just would not work, and we've been putting it off for a couple of years now. But we just have to do this now. But it is very marginal. That $500,000, like you said, it's about $60 on an average size home. it comes out to be about 17 cents a day, or about $120 for your average priced home. And but we could not do it any other way,
Right.
given, and that's important to note that, and that was why it was recommended that we do it for 6 years instead of doing this every 4 years. 6 years, I'm telling you, this will take it through 6, 8. We will not need to revisit this again.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I'm proud of in the working with both the fire and police departments, is that we have a clear vision for the next 6 years. We're throwing lots of dollars out, but I want to just circle back because you said a few numbers there. But the increase is going to be roughly, for the average Orion resident, around $60, maybe a few bucks less on the fire side. So that's the increase, and I wanted to make sure that that's clear. It's not what you're paying. In total, it's roughly around $350, but you've already been paying roughly $300, and you pay that millage on your winter tax bill. So if you dig that out, you can see specifically that's where most of the township revenue comes, through the winter tax bill. Well, most of the summer tax revenue goes to the schools and the county and other entities. So we talked about the budget, and Dan, you present a balanced budget to the board every year you've been here. This year and last year, and going forward, we're seeing last year it was tight. This year, we're spending a little bit of our fund balance to continue to provide the level of services that you've just talked about. And then going forward, had we stayed at the same number, we would actually be spending more than we're bringing in revenue, and that's why you're asking for it. It's not to build a war chest of money. We're really just trying to ask our residents, and that's what we did when you first got on the scene here, is we want to ask for just what we need. And that's what we're doing now, and we think that's going to get us through the next 6 years. We don't know what happens after that. But any other thoughts just on any of that? Or, the one thing we talked about with fire too, and I'll give you an opportunity here, I promise, is we also look at what the neighbors are charging their residents. So just chime in on any of that stuff there.
And that's very important, but there's a slide in the PowerPoint where there's peer comparables.
Yeah.
And typically the cost for police services in Orion Township is half or a third than many of our surrounding communities' police services budgets. And this is a totally dedicated to police service. It's dedicated to operational costs for salaries and the basic equipment. There is no other thrills involved with this. We don't have any special projects or anything else. This is to maintain the dedicated police services fund for the next 6 years, and I think that slide right there shows where we're at. Like I said, it's half of some and a third of some in our comparable townships.
Yeah, and that's all audited data. That's
Right.
not fuzzy math. We do take it really serious when we're asking our residents for their hard-earned money. If you have questions, we are completely open and transparent. If you want to see the budget, if you want to talk about how much does the deputy cost, there's no secrets here. This is your police department. If you live in Orion Township, this is your police department, this is your fire department. The most important thing, and the reason we did this short program for you to watch, was so that you could get some of your questions answered. But if we left things unanswered, we would love to hear from you. So with that, thank you, Lieutenant Toth.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief Duke, for sitting with us earlier. And thank you to our residents for helping continue to make our community the best community in Southeast Michigan. Don't forget, the election is August 4th. You may be already getting those absentee ballots to your mailbox if you've registered to vote by absentee. So get the information, get informed, and make sure you get out and vote August 4th. Thank you so much.